Why do people commit crimes? Human nature is intricate and multifaceted, and every action has its reasons. This time, we will not discuss individuals with mental health issues and their tendencies toward violence, nor will we cover military personnel whose job involves eliminating enemies. Instead, we'll focus on other primary motives for life-threatening acts: material gain, revenge, exceeding the limits of necessary defense, and accidental incidents. English isn't my first language, so I might not be perfect at it. Thank you for your patience and understanding as I try my best to communicate with you. Feel free to ask if anything isn't clear. Most crimes occur domestically during conflicts and disputes, often when everything seems fine. However, these acts of violence are not causes, but consequences of human spirit degradation, leaving a lasting mark. On the morning of January 12, 2019, it was reported that 65-year-old Michael Redlick had passed away. Known as a former NBA executive with the Memphis Grizzlies and a beloved professor at the University of Central Florida, it was initially believed he died from a heart attack. However, upon the arrival of emergency services, it became clear that Mr. Redlick died from a stab wound to the chest. Various theories were considered, including self-inflicted harm. Later, forensic experts determined that the incident was a criminal act. The perpetrator was soon identified as his beloved wife. By June 2022, she stood trial. Yet, this story is not straightforward. She did not admit to the intentional crime and frequently changed her testimony. The legal battle between the prosecution and defense was long and heated, ultimately leading to an unexpected verdict. What really happened in Winter Park, Florida? Who is the true victim, and could this tragedy have been prevented? Let's explore together. Sitting in the defendant's chair is 46-year-old Danielle Redlick. Petite and slim, her chestnut hair has visibly grayed, possibly due to spending 3 years in custody or from the stress and turmoil she's endured. Until 2019, she was an ordinary working American woman, a mother of 2 wonderful children, and a specialist in multimedia communications. She wasn't particularly well known, but after the crime against her husband, her name frequently appeared in the media. This is what happens when the dirty laundry of seemingly respectable spouses is aired publicly. Danielle was born in 1976 in Florida. After some time, her family moved to Cleveland, Ohio. Her childhood was typical. She grew up kind, well-mannered, and creative. As the eldest child in her family, her appreciation for beauty intensified as she matured. She enrolled at Valencia College, earning an Associate of Arts degree, and later attended the psychology department at Baldwin Wallace University. In 1996, Danielle's mother, Caitlin Aquino, remarried, but the marriage lasted only 2 years before Caitlin passed away from cancer. It turns out she had been battling breast cancer for a long time. Thanks to her husband's comprehensive insurance, she received high-quality medical care, which was the primary reason for legally formalizing their marriage. Unfortunately, the treatment ultimately did not yield the desired result. After his wife's death, Michael not only became a widower, but also took on the role of a true father to her children. Finding it difficult to raise them alone, he asked for help from Caitlin's eldest daughter, Danielle. At that time, 22-year-old Danielle was living independently but responded to the request. Thus, after Caitlin's death, Danielle, her brother, sister, and stepfather, Michael Redlick, all ended up under one roof. Yes, you heard right. The very same Michael who later became Danielle's husband and was fatally attacked on a winter evening in 2019. Initially, their relationship was built on friendship. Danielle took care of the younger kids and worked part-time at a bar at night, while Michael was building his career in professional sports, involved in player recruitment. He grew very attached to the children, became like his own, and felt comfortable with Danielle. Over time, she saw him as a dependable support despite the 20-year age difference. Their interaction was easy and natural. Gradually, the man and woman grew closer. Neither age nor status bothered them. However, Danielle initially kept their relationship hidden from her family. With his new partner, Michael felt younger and more energetic, and Danielle felt loved and protected. Using his connections, he easily found her a new job in an advertising agency. Besides having a high income, he devoted all his free time to the family. Overall, things were going well for both of them. Eventually, Mr. Redlick received the tempting job offer. He was invited to become the vice president of corporate sales for the Memphis Grizzlies basketball team. However, the new job required moving to another state. Without hesitation, he asked Danielle to come with him, but she hesitated. Danielle didn't want to change her familiar lifestyle, and she was still studying, so she declined. Yet their relationship continued long distance, and the lovers often saw each other. One day, he showed her the house he had bought for them, impressing her. The cottage was located in a picturesque area by the Mississippi River. The neighborhood was quiet and cozy. Ultimately, Danielle decided to move and live together. To ensure she had no doubts, he found her an interesting job in the radio industry. Later, Danielle recalled that at first, everything was perfect. However, Michael's job eventually brought changes. Many years later, during the trial against Danielle, her 15-year-old daughter, Jaden, testified. She spoke of how Michael was an excellent father who did a lot for his family. Along with her 8-year-old brother, Sawyer, they attended one of the best schools, hoping to pursue careers in sports. Thanks to their dad's encouragement and support in enrolling them in sports programs, Jaden was close to her father, which she couldn't say about her mother, whom she saw as hysterical, manipulative, and toxic at times. The young lady believed that Danielle instigated all the conflicts at home, while Michael tried to keep the family in peace. But was it really as Jaden perceived it? What caused the discord in what seemed like a happy and united family? Mr. Redlick's new position came with increased responsibility and stress, and he had a difficult relationship with the management. This took a toll on him, making him very stressed and tired. Eventually, to relax and unwind, Michael turned to alcoholic beverages. Over time, this became a daily occurrence. He would often stay out late, returning home intoxicated and angry. The tension in the house was palpable. Danielle tried to support her husband, understanding his condition. After talking to her, it seemed he would calm down and promised to stop, but his promises were short-lived. One time, Michael missed a dinner they had planned together. This was not the first occurrence, but this time they had specifically arranged to spend the evening together. Danielle was very upset and stated that if he couldn't make time for her, he should have warned her so she could make other plans. Heading towards the door, she made an ill-timed joke which struck a nerve with Michael. He stood in the doorway and hit her across the face. The slap was so forceful that she staggered back. She then noticed that her clothes and the floor were splattered with blood. In shock, she recoiled from her husband, who began crying and apologizing, clearly distressed. Michael tried to make amends immediately. He took his wife to a familiar sports doctor and explained what had happened. The doctor examined the unfortunate victim, provided first aid, and then recommended seeing a dentist and a plastic surgeon, as the injuries were quite severe. Danielle even had a front tooth knocked out. The next day, Michael arranged a memorable dinner and was very attentive and caring. Undoubtedly, his wife forgave him and did not report the incident. Given the state's strict domestic violence laws, Mrs. Redlick felt sympathy for her husband and decided not to cause him any further trouble. This was not the first warning sign, however. Danielle had already encountered similar behavior while they were living together in Cleveland. At a concert, Danielle chatted with an ex-boyfriend, which made Michael jealous. On their way home, he dropped a few sarcastic comments about it. When Danielle responded in kind, he unexpectedly hit her, then immediately apologized, noting that he did it because she had hurt his feelings. Danielle forgave her partner, blaming herself as well, and over time, the incident was forgotten. After all, things happen in relationships. In 2003, the Redlicks welcomed their first child, a daughter named Jaden. A year later, the couple decided to legalize their relationship. It was a bright period in their lives, and everything seemed to be going well. However, Michael still faced challenges at work. The management changed, and he couldn't get the promotion he had hoped for. 7 years later, the family grew with the addition of a son named Sawyer. The parents were fully engaged in raising their children, but Michael's job continued to be a source of tension, leading him to start drinking again. This led to more frequent conflicts. During one argument, Michael grabbed Danielle by the throat and pinned her against the wall, which terrified her. This time, she couldn't tolerate the rough behavior and packed up, taking the children and moving in with her relatives. It's worth noting that her relatives had not initially approved of the marriage, but had eventually come to terms with it. Michael repeatedly visited her, apologizing and asking her to come back home. After some time, their relationship was restored. The following years were unstable. The Redlicks moved several times. Michael was offered a job in California, where they lived for about 5 years. This period was hardly successful, as Michael struggled with his issues and continued to indulge in drinking. There came a time when both spouses were unemployed and lived off their savings. In 2014, another move was on the horizon, this time to Indiana. However, the prospects were promising. To find a new home and settle matters, Michael went ahead first. Danielle stayed in California with the children to sell their old property and belongings. The constant moving had become exhausting, making it difficult for the children to adapt to rapidly changing environments. The whole process took a year, during which time the family's financial situation improved. However, the marital relationship underwent changes. The distance and infrequent meetings affected them. Danielle and Michael grew distant and barely communicated. When the spouses finally reunited, they faced new issues. At one point, Danielle began to suspect her husband of infidelity. He had become unusually cold and distant, and the former passion had faded. Michael found the strength to confess that his age and health were to blame. He had been embarrassed to mention this earlier, fearing he would lose his younger wife. Danielle was grateful for his honesty and supported him as before. After trying numerous medications, the couple decided to undergo a course of hormone injections. Their struggles were significant, but they kept trying to find ways to make their relationship work. Unfortunately, the accumulation of stress, misunderstandings, and unresolved conflicts ultimately led to the tragic events of January 2019. Testosterone injections helped Michael rejuvenate physically and mentally. He seemed to become younger, regaining his former energy and vigor. However, this also brought an increase in his aggressiveness. One evening, while watching a movie together, Michael fell asleep. Danielle went upstairs to rest. The next morning, he entered the bathroom while she was brushing her teeth and struck her on the head. He justified his action by saying she had not woken him up the evening before. She responded that she was tired of this and was leaving, which only angered him further. He began to choke her, and poor Danielle could not defend herself and began to lose consciousness. At one moment, she felt like she was dying. After some time, Mrs. Redlick opened her eyes and saw her husband standing over her, scared and confused, begging for forgiveness. All Danielle could do was silently crawl away. After this incident, they continued to live in the same house and raise their children together, but their relationship fundamentally changed. Apparently, a point of no return had been reached. Michael began to drink more frequently, and conflicts in the home increased, even over trivial matters. The number of times Michael's discontent escalated into physical aggression increased. Despite her dissatisfaction with the situation and resentment towards her husband, Danielle did not leave him. She continued to love him deeply. The ongoing situation also affected Danielle. She became nervous and irritable, withdrawing into herself. To distract herself, she took up photography. Nevertheless, their family still appeared respectable, as most of their disagreements did not extend beyond the home. By the end of 2014, the Redlicks finally settled in Florida. This time, Michael decided to change his career path. Tired of the constant stress, he took a position as Director of External Affairs and Partnership Programs at the University of Central Florida and began teaching. Although his income was less than what he made in the NBA, the job brought him enjoyment and stability. Initially, the family rented a home, but after a year, they purchased their own property in the quaint area of Winter Park. Their family home was impressive, designed in a Mediterranean style with a huge square footage. Danielle favored the attic floor, which served as her retreat. She often spent nights there, especially when Michael had bouts of anger. Testosterone injections rejuvenated him and restored their intimate life. But even during intimate moments, he could be harsh. Their relationship remained tense and unstable. Against this backdrop, Danielle developed an alcohol dependency. While Michael worked and supported the family, Danielle managed the household and children, increasingly withdrawing into herself. The numerous disputes eventually led to the couple separating in 2016. Despite this, Michael continued to see the children and support them financially, paying the bills. By this time, Danielle had found a job at a school. New acquaintances helped her out of her depression, and her responsibilities restored her independence. However, she still continued to see Michael, who could come and go as he pleased. During one of these visits, another argument ensued, after which Danielle ended up in the hospital with a concussion. She kept silent again and did not tell the truth about what happened, fearing it would cause problems for her husband. However, this time, Michael took her silence for granted. During questioning, Danielle confessed that in early October 2016, something extraordinary happened. Her husband had tried to run her over with his car. She was saved only because she managed to jump into the bushes. After this, Danielle went to the police department. However, when detectives began to inquire in detail about the incident, she changed her mind and left, for the same reason as always. Later, the couple reconciled and moved back in together. However, this turned out to be a fateful decision for both of them. At around 9:00 a.m. on January 12, 2019, a 911 call was made. On the other end of the line, a woman introduced herself as Danielle Redlick and reported that her husband, Michael, had died from a heart attack. When the rescue service arrived at the scene and entered the house, they immediately noticed the strong smell of cleaning agent at the entrance to the living room. The team encountered a bucket filled with pink-colored water. Beyond this, a scene from a thriller unfolded. A man lay on the floor in a pool of blood, lifeless. It was clear that the unfortunate man had not died from a heart attack, as his wife had claimed, but from a penetrating knife wound. The woman who made the call was also found with cuts on her wrists. Paramedics provided first aid before taking her to the hospital. Following them, the police began their investigation. When investigators examined the scene, they were certain that Michael Redlick's life had been taken. It was unlikely that he could have inflicted such a fatal injury on himself. Later forensic analysis confirmed that the blood traces in the home belonged to the deceased. The pink liquid in the bucket at the entrance was nothing but diluted blood. Someone, possibly the homeowner herself, had tried to erase a trail leading from the bedroom to the living room, indicating that the body had been dragged. Despite the cleaning efforts, not all evidence was destroyed. Blood spatter was found in the corners of the room and on the walls. Moreover, a large knife lay at the entrance to the kitchen, and 3 smaller knives were found in the sink. Detectives were eager to speak with Danielle. Once doctors reported that her injuries were not life-threatening, she was questioned. During the interview, she repeatedly changed her statements. Initially, she claimed to have thought her husband died of heart disease. Later, she stated that he had taken his own life following an argument. However, experts refuted her claims. Such a wound is difficult to self-inflict, and individuals intending to end their life usually choose a simpler and less painful method. The autopsy showed that Michael died from blood loss. With timely medical help, his life could have been saved. Additionally, he had a lacerated left eye. Toxicological tests also revealed a high level of alcohol in his system. The investigation revealed that a few days before the incident, there was an argument between the spouses, witnessed by their elder daughter. Michael had been drinking and burst into the bathroom, where Danielle was hiding. However, their daughter Jaden intervened, taking the bottle away from him. After this, Danielle left the house and returned once her husband had fallen asleep. According to the girl, it was the first time she had seen such a burst of anger in her father, for which he later apologized multiple times. She still maintained that he was a loving and caring father while asserting that her mother was the instigator of conflicts. The next day, the couple reconciled. Michael invited his wife and children to a soccer game. However, according to witnesses, Danielle appeared upset and was virtually non-communicative. That evening, the parents dropped their kids off at a friend's house for a sleepover and were left alone. Later, Danielle stopped by McDonald's and returned home around 10:30 p.m. Upon entering the house, she found her husband drunk. During dinner, Danielle received a message from an unknown man. Michael saw it, bit off a piece of his hamburger, and spit it at his wife. He then attacked her, attempting to strangle her. In self-defense, Danielle grabbed the first thing she could, a knife, and stabbed him in the chest. He fell and began to bleed profusely. According to the defendant, she immediately called emergency services, but mistakenly dialed the wrong number. Her actions were later corroborated during the investigation. In a state of shock, she lay down next to Michael and fell asleep until morning. At least, that's how Danielle explained the 11 hours of inactivity when asked by the prosecution why she lied during the emergency call and subsequent questioning. Mrs. Redlick explained that she was afraid and concerned that no one would believe she acted in self-defense. There were reasons for this fear. Shortly before the incident, she had been involved in a scuffle with friends. When police arrived at the scene, she resisted, attempting to bite one of them. She also refused to cooperate with the investigation, leading to charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Danielle had been on probation for about a year. It was also established that the cuts on her wrists were self-inflicted. She claimed she had tried to end her life due to the emotional turmoil, but the nature of the injuries suggested otherwise. Otherwise, they were superficial and not life-threatening. so her claims were not believed. Investigators also discovered that Danielle was far from a role model. After learning of Michael's infidelities, she signed up on a dating site, interacted with men, and retaliated by being unfaithful. Her profile status declared she was single and not in a relationship. An analysis of countless messages between Michael and Danielle showed that she still loved her husband. Once she learned of his affairs, she felt betrayed and disillusioned. She also discovered that Michael planned to leave her despite appearing repentant and desiring to mend their relationship. Danielle explained that it was hard for her to understand and accept her husband's actions. She was heartbroken, having dedicated the best years of her life to a man who did not appreciate her. The prosecution used this information against her, arguing that the crime was premeditated and committed in a fit of rage because she could not forgive his infidelity and the impending divorce. Like Mr. Redlick, she was prone to fits of anger, confirmed by neighbors who noted that the couple often argued loudly, escalating into physical altercations. However, Michael and Danielle were described differently by those who knew them. Michael was portrayed positively as kind and helpful, while Danielle was seen as quarrelsome. Video evidence was presented showing Danielle acting irrationally and attacking her husband. Friends and Michael's brother agreed with this portrayal, with one recalling calling her crazy, but assuring that all would be well as long as steak knives were hidden. Danielle's lawyer argued that her actions were dictated by self-defense and a history of emotional and physical abuse. Relatives, often witnesses to their arguments, confirmed that Michael was rough and emotionally abusive. They also knew he frequently physically abused and humiliated her, although never in their presence. Some family members reported that Danielle was nervous and quick-tempered, a trait that only emerged after years of marriage. The story of Lily, a person whose outer innocence masked a terrifying reality. Early psychological and physical traumas can unpredictably shape someone's adult life. While not every individual who faces such hardships turns to malevolence, in some cases, these experiences can forge a genuine monster. According to criminal psychologist Noah, there are certain genetic and psychophysical factors that might predispose someone to become a remorseless murderer, a topic he elaborates on in his work, The Anatomy of Violence. The annals of crime are replete with serial offenders whose nightmarish childhoods arguably set them on their dark paths, and Lily might just be among them. With her deceptive, angelic looks, she lured her victims before committing heinous acts. Though the courts only convicted her of 2 murders, experts believe she was responsible for many more. Let's delve into this complex tale from the start, exploring whether Lily was innately monstrous or molded into one by the harshness she endured in her youth. Who was Lily? Born on July 4, 1958, in the quaint rural setting of Fort Payne, Alabama, Sheila was the youngest of 3 siblings. Growing up on a farm surrounded by cornfields, she lived a life marked by both beauty and isolation. Her older sibling recalls Sheila as a lively, curious, and imaginative young girl, always seeking attention and brimming with creativity. Let's embark on this journey to uncover the truth behind Lily's story, questioning if her monstrous deeds were inherent or the product of a tragic upbringing. As we delve deeper into Lily's life, we encounter a narrative punctuated by contradictions and tragedies that may have contributed to her eventual transformation into a figure of horror. Sheila's early years, characterized by a semblance of rural idyll, masked underlying tumults and potential early signs of psychological distress. Her transition from an imaginative and vibrant child to an adult capable of unimaginable cruelty raises questions about the nature versus nurture debate in the development of a criminal mind. It's crucial to explore the environment and experiences that may have acted as catalysts for her dark journey. During her teenage years, Sheila's behavior reportedly began to show erratic patterns, hinting at underlying issues that were possibly exacerbated by her surroundings or personal experiences. The detailed accounts of her life during this period remain sparse, but it's suggested that she encountered numerous challenges that could have impacted her psychological development. Upon reaching adulthood, Sheila's angelic facade became a tool in a sinister arsenal. Her ability to manipulate and charm those around her speaks to a certain psychological savvy which she employed with deadly effectiveness. The disparity between her outward appearance and her actions underscores a deeply troubling duality. The victims of Lily were drawn into her web under the guise of affection and care, a testament to her manipulative prowess. Each case that came to light revealed a pattern of predatory behavior, cloaked in a veneer of normalcy and benevolence. This manipulation of perception was a key element of her modus operandi, allowing her to operate undetected for years. The investigation into Lily's crimes peeled back the layers of her meticulously crafted persona, revealing the depth of her deception. Law enforcement officials, upon unraveling the extent of her actions, were confronted with the challenge of proving her guilt in the face of her calculated innocence. In the courtroom, Lily's case became a study in the complexities of criminal psychology, with experts delving into her past in search of explanations for her present. The debate over whether she was born with a predisposition towards violence or shaped by her experiences became central to the proceedings. Understanding Lily's story requires a careful consideration of both her life's narrative and the broader questions it raises about human nature, morality, and the capacity for change. Her story is a somber reminder of the potential for darkness that resides within, influenced by a confluence of factors both innate and external. As we reflect on Lily's life and crimes, it becomes clear that the journey from innocence to monstrosity is complex and multifaceted. It challenges us to think deeply about the origins of evil and the possibility of redemption, even in the most troubling of cases. Attention had always followed Sheila. With a beautiful voice and captivating looks, she could have been a star. But fate had other plans. Instead of adorning bright billboards, her name filled the dark pages of criminal records. The unimaginable cruelty of her father, Leo. Alcohol ruled his life, turning him into a monster at home. His binges transformed him into a beast, hurling insults and beatings with abandon. He wasn't above throwing his family out in the middle of the night, forcing them to huddle in the barn or shiver in the open fields. One drunken rampage turned particularly violent. A hurled flower pot struck Sheila's head, leaving a permanent scar at her temple, a constant reminder of the trauma. But the physical wounds paled in comparison to the violations she and her sisters suffered at their father's hands. Their mother, aware perhaps but powerless, remained silent. Despite the horrors at home, Sheila thrived in school. Her ambition burned bright, a desperate yearning to escape the farm and pursue her dreams in the big city. She wouldn't let her circumstances extinguish her determination. Sheila was deeply committed to achieving her dreams of becoming an actress or a pop star, equipped with an engaging personality, striking looks, and a beautiful singing voice. Barely an adult at 18, she left the tumultuous environment of her family home, only to face the stark challenges of independence. Hindered by her mediocre academic performance, she couldn't pursue higher education, and without sufficient funds, the move to a major city remained out of reach. Consequently, Sheila took a job as a hotel maid, a position her older sister already held. Sheila's allure was undeniable, with her slim physique, vivid blue eyes, winsome smile, and voluminous hair capturing abundant male attention. With time, she adeptly learned to navigate this attention to her benefit. In the late 1970s, her life took a turn when she met Liam, a young man with a daughter from a past relationship. Despite his parental responsibilities, the couple married quickly. However, their marriage crumbled in mere months due to Sheila's mistreatment of Jonathan's daughter, ranging from physical abuse to confinement for minor misbehaviors. Upon discovering this, Jonathan swiftly filed for divorce, banishing Sheila and her belongings from his life without a backward glance. Sheila's fervent ambition to realize her childhood dreams burned brightly within her, fueled by an unwavering determination to break free from the constraints of her upbringing. Despite the allure of the stage and the promise of stardom, her journey into adulthood took an unexpected turn when she hastily entered into marriage at the tender age of 18. Leaving behind the tumultuous environment of her family home, Sheila found herself grappling with the harsh realities of adulthood. hindered by her academic shortcomings and the financial constraints that tethered her to her small-town existence. The glittering lights of the big city remained tantalizingly out of reach. Undeterred, she seized upon the opportunity to work as a maid in a local hotel, where her older sister had already carved out a place for herself. Sheila's magnetic presence drew admiring gazes wherever she went, her slender frame and captivating features making her the object of desire for many suitors. With each passing day, she honed her ability to captivate and manipulate those who sought her attention, skillfully weaving her way through the complex web of human emotions. It was amidst the backdrop of the late 1970s that Sheila's life intersected with that of Liam, a young man with a daughter from a previous relationship. Despite the complexities of his past, Sheila found herself drawn to Jonathan's youthful charm and the promise of a fresh start. Their whirlwind romance culminated in marriage, yet the honeymoon phase proved to be short-lived. Behind closed doors, a darker reality emerged as Sheila's struggles with her newfound role as a stepmother came to light. Jonathan's daughter became the unwitting victim of her frustrations, subjected to mistreatment and neglect at the hands of her new guardian. When Jonathan uncovered the truth, he wasted no time in severing ties with Sheila, casting her out of his life without a second thought. Left to navigate the turbulent waters of single dom once more, Sheila found herself adrift in a sea of fleeting romances and fractured dreams. Yet, amid the wreckage of her past, a glimmer of hope remained, a flickering beacon of possibility that beckoned her towards a future yet unwritten. After her second marriage ended, the young woman began seeking companionship through the dating columns of print media, leaving her ads there as well. However, none of her relationships lasted long, as Sheila tended to assert dominance, stifling her partners both intimately and in daily life. Meanwhile, the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section caught the attention of 60-year-old Aaron. Having been married twice before with adult children and grandchildren and widowed a few years ago, Bill lived alone on his spacious country ranch. A wealthy man with a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and a passion for raising horses, Bill was deeply lonely and sought a strong, powerful companion. Sheila, drawn to Bill's wealth, saw him as an ideal match. She allured him with frank letters and nude photos, enticing him to invite her to his ranch. Their romance blossomed quickly, with Bill showering his young mistress with expensive gifts. In the summer of 1987, Sheila moved in with him, greatly flattering the doctor, who relished having a beautiful, much younger companion by his side. Although Bill never intended to marry Sheila, she preemptively took on his last name, assuming they were bound in matrimony. Sheila gradually exerted control over Bill's affairs, including his business, finances, and property. As Bill aged and became unable to fulfill her intimate needs, Sheila claimed he allowed her to seek companionship elsewhere, often bringing other men into their home without his objection. One of Sheila's regular lovers in the mid-90s was Jackson, a Jamaican national significantly younger than her. Initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, Wayne soon moved into the owner's house with Bill's reluctant consent, likely pressured by Sheila. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne formalized their relationship, with Sheila declaring him her sole partner. However, Wayne soon discovered that Sheila continued seeing other men. Frustrated, Wayne confronted Sheila and her latest lover, resulting in a physical altercation where both suffered injuries. Sheila, accustomed to dominance, found herself unsure how to handle Wayne's aggression, leading to their eventual divorce. Seeking protection, Sheila obtained a court injunction against Wayne, accusing him of violence and assault. Despite the divorce, Sheila's tumultuous personal life persisted. Her relationships frequently ended in legal disputes, with men accusing her not only of cruelty, but also of endangering their lives. She intentionally struck one boyfriend with a car, merely running him over, while another suffered a severe head injury, and yet another was left permanently scarred after she scratched his face. As Sheila aged, her behavior became increasingly perilous. She demanded obedience from her partners, reacting with fury to any disobedience. In 2000, at the age of 74,
Bill LaBar passed away from heart failure. Although authorities found no evidence of foul play, his family suspected Sheila of slowly poisoning him over the years, believing she had driven him to his demise. Despite never being officially married, Sheila inherited all of Bill's property according to his will. Despite attempts by his relatives to contest the will in court, they were unsuccessful, convinced that Sheila had coerced Bill into leaving her everything he owned. As Sheila's life unfolded, her relationships continued to entangle her in drama and danger. Jackson, a young Jamaican national, entered her life as an au pair on the ranch. Despite their significant age gap, Sheila and Wayne found themselves drawn to each other, and with Bill's hesitant approval, Wayne moved into the main house. Their relationship deepened, culminating in a formal union in 1995. Sheila assured Wayne that he was her only love, yet behind his back she continued her liaisons with other men. The discovery of Sheila's infidelity ignited a fiery confrontation between Wayne and her latest paramour. Fists flew and tempers flared, leaving both men nursing bruises and resentment. For the first time, Sheila found herself on the receiving end of aggression, unsure how to quell the turmoil within her love life. As tensions escalated, Sheila made the painful decision to end her marriage with Wayne, seeking legal protection from his violent outbursts. Despite the dissolution of her marriage, Sheila's penchant for tumultuous relationships persisted. Her love affairs became battlegrounds, marked by legal disputes and accusations of brutality. She wielded her power recklessly, using her car as a weapon against one lover and inflicting permanent scars on another in fits of rage. With each passing year, Sheila's behavior grew increasingly erratic and dangerous. She demanded absolute obedience from her partners, brooking no dissent. Any challenge to her authority elicited a torrent of fury, leaving her lovers cowed and scarred both physically and emotionally. In 2000, the patriarch of Sheila's tumultuous love life, Bill LaBar, succumbed to heart failure at the age of 74. Though authorities found no evidence of foul play, suspicions lingered among his family members. They harbored a deep-seated belief that Sheila had slowly poisoned Bill over the years, manipulating him until his untimely demise. Despite never formalizing their relationship through marriage, Sheila inherited the entirety of Bill's estate, as outlined in his will. His relatives, convinced that Sheila had coerced Bill into bequeathing his wealth to her, attempted to contest the will in court to no avail. The legacy of Sheila's chaotic love life endured, casting a shadow over the memory of Bill LaBar and leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives in its wake. Following Bill's passing, Sheila gained full control over his estate. Unrestrained by anyone else's opinion, she transformed her home into a den of temptation and indulgence, where inhibitions held no sway. Sheila prowled the streets, bars, and internet, ensnaring men with promises of unearthly pleasure, only to subject them to her whims upon arrival at her ranch. She didn't discriminate based on age, skin color, or appearance, luring couriers with offers of alternative payments. However, Sheila's allure faded with time, and her attempts at seduction were met with reluctance. Neighbors observed a revolving door of men at her ranch, some fleeing shortly after arrival, others lingering briefly. Desperate to satisfy her desires, Sheila targeted men in dire circumstances, exploiting their vulnerabilities. Among them was George, a homeless man grappling with addiction, whom Sheila offered shelter, sustenance, and drugs in exchange for companionship. As Michael became ensnared in Sheila's web, she subjected him to increasingly sadistic acts, relishing in his torment. Despite his attempts to escape, Michael remained under her control, too afraid to seek help. When his family finally intervened, it was too late. Michael vanished without a trace, and Sheila's claims of their breakup offered no solace. Unbeknownst to Archie County, a naive young man drawn in by Sheila's enchanting voice and promises of love, he was soon ensnared in her web of manipulation. Sheila exploited Archie's dependence on his mother, severing ties and luring him into her home,
with false promises of everlasting bliss. Yet, Archie's dreams turned to nightmares as Sheila revealed her true nature, subjecting him to brutal assaults in a chamber of horrors within her home. Despite his battered state, Archie remained trapped, unable to break free from his captor's grasp. Sheila had full control over Archie, isolating him from his loved ones. His family, unable to contact him, could only speculate about his well-being. Concerns about Archie's welfare arose when neighbors noticed his alarming physical state. A store clerk captured an image of Archie, revealing his emaciated form, bruised face, and probable broken nose, indicating prolonged abuse. Even his purchases, including fuel for self-cremation, raised alarm among store staff. Despite reports to the police about possible domestic violence, Sheila evaded repercussions. She prevented Archie from contacting his family and rebuffed their inquiries with aggression. Eventually, Archie's family reported him missing, suspecting he was held against his will at Sheila's ranch. Police investigations uncovered disturbing evidence, including human remains in makeshift fires and traces of blood throughout the property. The discovery of videotapes further exposed Sheila's depravity, as they depicted tortured confessions from Archie and others. Sheila's deteriorating mental health became a focal point of her defense, with claims of delusions and schizophrenia. However, testimonies from ex-husbands and lovers painted her as volatile and manipulative. Despite attempts to plead insanity, Sheila was convicted in 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Sheila currently serves her sentence in Florida's Homestead Correctional Facility. This case highlights the harrowing consequences of unchecked mental illness and manipulation. The case of Sheila and Archie unveils a chilling narrative of manipulation and violence. Sheila's iron grip over Archie's life, cutting him off from his loved ones and subjecting him to unimaginable abuse, reflects the darkest corners of human behavior. Archie's plight, hidden behind closed doors, serves as a stark reminder of the silent suffering endured by many victims of domestic abuse. The gradual escalation of concern, from neighbors noticing Archie's deteriorating appearance to the eerie discoveries made by the police at Sheila's ranch, paints a grim picture of the extent of her atrocities. The image of human remains burning in makeshift fires and traces of blood scattered throughout the property evoke a sense of horror and disbelief. The videotapes depicting tortured confessions reveal the depths of Sheila's depravity and the lengths she would go to maintain her control. The testimonies of those who knew her further expose her manipulative nature and the terror she inflicted upon her victims. Despite attempts to plead insanity, the court's decision to convict Sheila and sentence her to life imprisonment without parole sends a clear message about accountability for one's actions, regardless of mental health struggles. However, it also raises questions about the adequacy of mental health support systems and the importance of early intervention in preventing such tragedies. Sheila's case serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of vigilance and intervention in cases of domestic abuse, as well as the need for continued efforts to address mental health issues within society. Only by shining a light on such dark corners can we hope to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The aftermath of Sheila's arrest opened a window into the complex web of her psyche. As forensic experts delved deeper into the investigation, they uncovered not only the physical evidence of her crimes, but also the twisted labyrinth of her mind. Sheila's mental health history emerged as a central focus, raising questions about the intersection of mental illness and criminal behavior. Her delusional disorder and signs of schizophrenia painted a haunting portrait of a mind consumed by paranoia and hallucinations. Sheila's self-proclaimed mission as an angel sent from heaven to protect children from harm revealed the distorted reality she inhabited. It was a reality where she saw herself as a righteous avenger, justified in her heinous acts by a divine mandate. The defense's attempts to portray Sheila as a profoundly sick individual struggling with the trauma of her past sought to humanize her in the eyes of the court. Yet, amidst the testimonies of her ex-husbands and lovers, a pattern of manipulation and violence emerged, challenging the notion of her innocence. the chilling accounts of Sheila's attempts to coerce others into carrying out her bidding, including plotting murder for personal gain, shed light on the depths of her moral depravity. Her ex-husband's descriptions of her relentless persuasion tactics underscored the calculated nature of her actions. Despite the defense's efforts to cast doubt on her culpability, the court's decision to convict Sheila spoke volumes about the gravity of her crimes. In the end, justice prevailed, and Sheila was sentenced to spend the rest of her life behind bars. Yet, even as Sheila languishes in prison, her case raises broader questions about the intersection of mental illness, manipulation, and criminality. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of early intervention and support for individuals struggling with mental health issues, as well as the need for vigilance in identifying and addressing signs of abuse and manipulation within our communities,
involving an innocent victim caught in her spouse's twisted passion. There's a saying that it's nearly impossible to re-educate an adult because their personality, views, way of thinking, preferences, character, and temperament are already well formed. However, some women believe that with patience and pedagogical talent, they can work wonders. More experienced women understand the importance of evaluating a man's flaws from the very beginning, deciding whether they can live with them, as infatuation and passion will fade, and negative qualities often worsen with age. When it comes to serious issues such as addictions, a pathological tendency to lie, and violence, it's best to walk away without looking back. But many women experience what's known as the rescuer syndrome, an acute and irrepressible desire to help, even at the cost of their own well-being. This syndrome devastated a young British woman named Vicky Roberts. For almost 3 years, she fought for her love, attempting to reform her cheating husband with sadistic tendencies. Tragically, all her efforts led only to pain, humiliation, and cruelty. Vicky Roberts, born Victoria Smith in September 1984 in Cheshire, northwest England, was the younger of 2 daughters in a conservative and deeply religious family. She attended a Christian school with her sister, practices music, and sang in the choir. Those who knew her described her as kind, friendly, and always willing to help others. After graduating from high school, Vicky went on to university and took a job at an IKEA store to pay for her education. It was during her time at IKEA that Vicky met a young man named Michael Roberts. They initially formed a friendly relationship. Michael, just a year older than Vicky, also worked at IKEA while studying. He was athletic, took good care of himself, and made a favorable impression on others. Although Vicky initially found Michael's sociable and charismatic nature a bit too talkative and intrusive, he quickly won her over. Michael Roberts was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, and was the eldest of 2 sons in a family headed by a prominent chemical engineer. His parents raised their children with strict expectations, especially for Michael, who was ambitious, goal-oriented, and academically successful. He was popular, often the life of the party, and proud of his romantic conquests. With his attractive appearance, tall and fit physique, good sense of humor, and intelligence, he could easily engage in conversations on any topic. Michael's parents instilled in him a belief in his superiority, nurturing a narcissistic disorder that worsened with age. Despite his confidence, he was always eager to please his parents, striving to be the perfect son. Michael never had a permanent girlfriend. He frequently changed partners and juggled multiple relationships without any of his lovers realizing they were not exclusive. He viewed the pursuit of seemingly unattainable girls as a game or competition, and Vicky, with her modest and reserved nature, became his next target. Initially, Vicky resisted Michael's advances, focusing on her studies and spending weekends at church. She wasn't interested in dating or relationships. However, Michael's persistence paid off after several months. He charmed her with sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and surprises. He even invited her to a family dinner, where his parents warmly approved of Vicky. She believed in his seriousness and eventually reciprocated his feelings, making Michael her first and only love. She felt truly happy and saw their relationship as destined. For a while, Michael seemed genuinely in love and ready to settle down. However, this didn't last. Despite their seemingly perfect romance, Vicky soon realized that Michael had an insatiable sexual appetite and a penchant for experimentation.
Initially, he was cautious, fearing Vicky might leave him. But once he was confident she wouldn't, he revealed his true nature. Vicky, a modest and religious girl, was shocked but deeply in love and trusted Michael, keeping their bedroom activities a secret. Michael proposed to Vicky, and she gladly accepted, hoping that marriage would change him and end his experiments. However, things didn't improve. Vicky confided in one of her closest friends about what was happening. Friends began to notice that Vicky was carefully hiding bruises and small marks under her clothes. One friend, concerned, initiated a candid conversation and asked if her fiancé was abusing her and if she needed help. Vicky initially denied everything, but eventually admitted that the marks were the result of Michael's intimate experiments. Michael had a particular passion for bondage and the use of various toys and devices. Vicky also confided that their intimacy occurred up to 5 times a day, yet Michael remained unsatisfied. Michael viewed himself as a skilled lover, seeing intimacy as an art and a means of self-expression. Sometimes he would compromise when Vicky refused to participate in dangerous experiments, but more often than not, he persuaded her to comply. After Vicky defended her diploma, she decided to change jobs and was soon hired as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retail chain. Thanks to his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills, he quickly excelled and was promoted to senior sales, with management considering him for a transfer to the main office after further training. Michael thrived on attending training sessions and business trips, often to London, and seemed to forget about his fiancée, remembering her only when he needed intimacy. They rarely spent time together outside the bedroom, and Vicky felt increasingly isolated. During this period, Michael began having affairs with colleagues, clients, and casual acquaintances, becoming obsessed with new conquests to maintain his self-esteem. When Vicky discovered she was pregnant, she happily shared the news with Michael, hoping it would prompt him to expedite their wedding plans. Instead, Michael reacted with anger, insisting that they were too young and had their whole lives ahead of them to have children later. Shocked, Vicky refused to terminate the pregnancy. Michael then tried to manipulate her by suggesting that the news would infuriate her religious parents, who would disapprove of their unwed daughter being pregnant. He assured her that terminating the pregnancy would be a secret, and they could have children after the wedding. After much persuasion, Vicky reluctantly agreed to an abortion. Unfortunately, complications arose, requiring her to stay in the hospital for several days and take nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly forbade any intimate activity. Michael, enraged by this restriction, began leaving the house daily under the pretense of urgent work matters. Vicky suspected he was seeking intimacy elsewhere but hoped things would change once they married, and she could help him overcome his addiction. Their engagement dragged on for nearly 2 years, with no wedding in sight. Michael seemed content with the status quo, a fiancée who faithfully waited for him at home and took care of household duties, and a string of mistresses on the side. Vicky, always hopeful for a better future, continued to endure the situation, believing she could eventually help him change. Vicky took Michael at his word, forgiving him each time he promised that his infidelity would be the last. However, as time passed, Vicky began to insist on marriage, yearning for a full-fledged family and children. Her parents also pressured her about this, and Michael's parents, who were fond of modest and sweet Vicky, frequently inquired about their wedding plans and potential grandchildren. Not wanting to disappoint his parents, Michael finally agreed to marry Vicky. With their parents' help, the couple organized a lavish wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared in love and happy, though few could guess the dark side of Michael that Vicky already knew well. The couple settled in a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, near Michael's parents. Despite the outward appearance of normalcy, Michael did not love Vicky. For him, the marriage served to maintain a facade of respectability while allowing him to continue his numerous affairs. Vicky never complained about his peculiarities or constant cheating, so Michael continued to change mistresses frequently. Professionally, he was successful, receiving promotions and making good money after being transferred to a new office. Michael's new boss, Carrie Hall, was the head of administration at Phones 4U. She was 10 years older, divorced, and raising a son. Attractive, well-groomed, and strong-willed, Carrie initially ignored Michael's advances. However, Michael, seeing this as a challenge, employed all his charm and eloquence to win her over. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated, and they began meeting regularly in hotel rooms. Their relationship was passionate and experimental, with Carrie, a mature and self-confident woman, enjoying the attention and the chance to try new things. Michael lied to Vicky about his late nights at work and corporate training, while telling Carrie how unhappy he was in his marriage, portraying it as a youthful mistake and claiming that Vicky refused to grant him a divorce. This affair lasted more than a year, with Carrie content to keep their meetings casual and discreet, having no illusions about Michael. During her relationship with Michael, Carrie began wearing clothing that concealed her figure, long sleeves and high collars, an unusual choice for her. When a close friend asked about this change, Carrie confided that Michael's intimate experiments sometimes left marks on her body. She showed the friend a bite mark on her chest and blue marks on her neck and wrists, explaining that Michael enjoyed having complete control over her, sometimes going to dangerous extremes like strangulation, which had caused her to lose consciousness a couple of times. Though the friend suggested going to the police, Carrie refused, asserting that everything was consensual. Vicky, too, was subjected to Michael's dangerous games, but always believed that one day he would tire of them or that she would get used to them. Unfortunately, neither Vicky nor any of Michael's mistresses attempted to stop him. Vicky had long suspected Michael's infidelities even before their marriage, and likely realized his addiction to these behaviors. She believed her love and care could eventually transform Michael into an exemplary family man, but this hope was in vain. After the wedding, the situation only worsened. Michael continued to deny his cheating convincingly, but Vicky decided to investigate on her own. While he was asleep, she checked his phone and found numerous intimate messages with Carrie and several other girls, including explicit photos. Shocked, Vicky packed her things and moved in with a friend. She didn't tell her parents or sister, fearing to upset them and knowing her religious family would insist on a divorce. Despite everything, Vicky was still in love and didn't want to break up with her husband. Before leaving, she wrote Michael a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and expressing her awareness of his infidelity. She explained that she couldn't tolerate it any longer and was leaving, but wouldn't file for divorce yet, giving him time to reflect. She left the letter on the refrigerator with a magnet. However, Michael was unmoved by her departure and only cared about not losing his compliant and devoted wife. That evening, Michael followed Vicky to her friend's house with a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized on his knees, begging her to return and promising she would be his only woman from now on. Vicky, wanting to believe him, returned home. Despite his promises, Michael didn't leave Carrie and continued seeing other women. For a while, he was more cautious, even coming home for dinners Vicky prepared. He hid his phone, deleted messages, and changed his social media passwords. During this time, he began an affair with a new young employee, Karen Wilson, without ending his relationship with Carrie. Karen was engaged and planning her wedding, but Michael pursued her relentlessly, portraying himself as a miserable lover trapped in an unhappy marriage. After 2 months, he broke up with Carrie, who he had grown tired of, and convinced Karen he was ready to leave his wife for her. They had an intimate encounter in the office, and a week later, Karen broke off her engagement, waiting for Michael to follow through on his promises. Michael, however, had no intention of divorcing Vicky or ending his relationship with Karen. He lied, claiming he had filed for divorce and moved in with his parents. Vicky soon suspected her husband was still cheating and decided to take definitive action. She took his phone while he was in the shower but found nothing, as he had learned from his previous mistakes, and deleted all incriminating texts and changed his social media password. Determined, Vicky waited until Michael fell asleep and checked his work laptop, where he hadn't logged out of his social media account. There she found messages with a new girlfriend, in which Michael professed his love and claimed he was divorcing Vicky and living with his parents. Devastated, Vicky took screenshots of the messages and saved them on her laptop as proof of his infidelity. She also found folded hotel room receipts in his wallet, further confirming his unfaithfulness. The next morning, Vicky confronted her spouse with everything she had discovered. For the first time in their relationship, she unleashed a scandal. Michael was distraught, trying to apologize and promising it would never happen again. But Vicky, exasperated, threatened to tell his parents, hoping they could make him see reason since she couldn't. Michael was infuriated by the threat. He didn't want his parents to know anything. In a fit of rage, he slapped his wife. Vicky, undeterred, stood up and announced she would go to his parents immediately. She headed for the door, but Michael caught up with her, hitting her twice in the head with a heavy jewelry box from the dressing table. When she lost consciousness, he strangled her until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, he wrapped her body in a blanket, packed it into several large garbage bags, and carried the gruesome bundle to his garage. Michael then swiftly cleaned up the house, packed away most of his wife's belongings, and called Karen, inviting her over. They had dinner and fun in the house where, just hours earlier, Michael had killed his wife. They even made love in the bedroom where the crime had occurred. The next day, Michael informed his parents that his wife had left him for another man. He visited them in person, sobbing on his mother's shoulder and showing her messages from Vicky's phone, messages he had sent himself. The messages claimed Vicky had fallen out of love and decided to live with another man. His parents, bewildered, consoled him, struggling to understand how their sweet, kind, and religious daughter-in-law could do such a thing. Meanwhile, Michael sent similar messages to Vicky's parents from her phone, asking them not to bother her and give her time. Suspicious, Vicky's parents tried calling her, but the calls were rejected, with only messages responding. Concerned, they went to Michael's house, but his story only raised more questions. When Vicky failed to show up for work without any notice, they decided to go to the police. On December 1st, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, several meters of rope, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, he didn't manage to dispose of the body because the police visited him that same day. They found nothing suspicious initially, but Michael's behavior and story raised doubts. Strangely, they overlooked the large package in the garage. Inside the house, there were no clothes, documents, or personal belongings of the missing woman, suggesting she hadn't left voluntarily. Vicky's laptop was found in the bedroom, and the police seized it. On the laptop, they discovered screenshots of Michael's correspondence with his mistresses, saved by Vicky. They then decided to trace Vicky's cell phone, which had been sending regular messages to her husband and relatives. The phone's location revealed it had been in the marital home all along. The police returned for a thorough search, finally unwrapping the suspicious package in the garage. The discovery shocked everyone. During the search, Michael had been with the police, but he managed to slip away unnoticed, taking a wallet with cash. He hid for several days without being detected. When his money ran out, Michael sought refuge with one of his mistresses, Lavinia T. That evening, Lavinia heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder and immediately reported his whereabouts to the police. At the time of his arrest, Michael was crying, insisting he was innocent and claiming his wife's death was an accident during an intimate game where he had accidentally strangled her. However, forensic experts found that Vicky had been strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 extensive hematomas on her head, injuries inconsistent with his story. Michael's trial began in January 2010. He continued to claim his wife's death was accidental, hoping for leniency. However, the autopsy results presented by experts proved otherwise. Michael had coldly hit his wife twice on the head and then strangled her before hiding the body in the garage. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of applying for parole after 17 years. Thus, Michael has a chance of being released in 2027. The community was in shock as news of Vicky's murder spread. Vicky was well loved, known for her kindness and involvement in local charities. Vigils were held in her memory, with friends, family, and community members mourning the loss of a vibrant and compassionate woman. Michael's parents were devastated, grappling with the dual horrors of losing their daughter-in-law and facing the reality that their son was responsible for her death. The betrayal cut deep, leaving them to question how they had missed the signs and failed to intervene. During the trial, the prosecution meticulously laid out the evidence against Michael. Vicky's parents attended every court session, determined to see justice served. Michael's defense tried to paint a picture of a man driven to a desperate act by stress and marital discord, but the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. The court's verdict of life imprisonment was a relief to Vicky's family, though it did little to ease their grief. After his conviction, Michael's lawyers filed several appeals, arguing procedural errors and claiming new evidence. However, each appeal was denied, reinforcing the strength of the original verdict. The legal battles kept the family in a state of limbo, reopening wounds each time a new hearing was announced. The Smith family struggled to move on. Vicky's parents, once a lively and social couple, became more reclusive, their grief palpable in every interaction. They established a foundation in Vicky's name to support victims of domestic violence, channeling their sorrow into advocacy and support for others in similar situations. This work gave them a renewed sense of purpose and a way to honor their daughter's memory. Michael's parents faced social ostracism from the community. Friends and neighbors, unsure how to respond, often kept their distance. Despite the judgment from others, they continued to visit Michael in prison, hoping to understand what drove their son to such a horrific act. They also sought therapy to deal with their conflicting emotions of love for their son and horror at his crime. In prison, Michael was initially resistant to any form of rehabilitation. He maintained his innocence for years, refusing to take responsibility for his actions. However, over time and through mandatory counseling sessions, he began to confront the reality of what he had done. This slow process of acknowledgement and the weight of his guilt started to break through his denial. March 2020, something terrible happened in a small Ohio community. Brenda Powell, who was 50 years old, was tragically murdered by her own daughter. Her daughter, Sydney Powell, was just 19 years old at the time. Sydney was in her second year at Mount Union University. People in the neighborhood thought the Powell family was happy and normal. Brenda and her husband, Steve, cared a lot about Sydney and her younger brother, Andrew. Sydney and Brenda were especially close, which made it hard for people to understand why Sydney would do something so awful. Just 2 years before the tragedy, Sydney was doing really well in high school. She did great in her classes and was also the captain of the soccer team. Because of her hard work, she got a scholarship to go to Mount Union. When Sydney moved to college in 2018, she seemed excited and ready for the future. But everything changed one day. Brenda was talking on the phone with Sydney's college about her grades when something terrible happened. Sydney attacked her own mother, using things from the kitchen as weapons. It was a shocking and violent act that ended Brenda's life. Afterwards, Sydney said she wasn't in the right state of mind and didn't know what she was doing. But the people who prosecuted her said that wasn't true. They said Sydney was responsible for what she did. In the days following the tragic event, the Powell family's once bright future turned into a dark cloud of sorrow and confusion. Neighbors who had known the family for years couldn't believe what had happened. They remembered seeing Brenda and Sydney together, laughing and chatting as they went about their daily routines. Now, the image of their happy family was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of Brenda's untimely death and Sydney's involvement. As the details of the incident emerged, so did the questions. How could a loving daughter commit such a violent act against her own mother? What could have driven Sydney to such extreme measures? Friends and acquaintances searched their memories for signs of trouble, but for many, Sydney's actions seemed completely out of character. The legal proceedings that followed only added to the community's sense of disbelief. Sydney's defense team argued that she was not in her right mind at the time of the attack, citing temporary insanity and delusions. However, prosecutors countered that Sydney's actions were premeditated and deliberate, pointing to evidence of mounting tension and frustration in the Powell household. As the case unfolded in court, emotions ran high. Brenda's family and friends struggled to come to terms with their loss, while Sydney's loved ones grappled with conflicting feelings of shock, disbelief, and loyalty. In the end, the tragedy served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the complexities of the human mind. Sydney's actions during the horrific crime showed that she was aware of what she was doing. This left everyone, her family, friends, and the larger community, deeply shocked and grappling with the senseless loss of Brenda Powell. People wondered if Sydney was truly disconnected from reality when she attacked her mother. The crime shook the entire neighborhood, and new shocking details emerged as police investigated. Detectives were still trying to understand why Sydney would do such a thing. When Sydney first arrived at Mount Union University in August 2018, she was excited to start college. Her freshman year went smoothly as she lived in a dorm with her high school friend, Lauren Curry. They even joined a sorority together, which helped Sydney make more friends and enjoy college life. Sydney seemed capable of handling her classes, though she sometimes worried about her schoolwork. When she came home for winter break, she was happy and full of stories about her experiences at college. Her parents hoped Sydney would continue to thrive in college. They were proud of the confident young woman she was becoming. However, things took a turn during her second year at Mount Union. Sydney began to struggle with her classes and missed assignments. She didn't seem as interested in her schoolwork as she was in socializing. By the end of her sophomore year, her grades were so low that she was put on academic probation. This meant she had to improve her grades, or she could face serious consequences. As Sydney's second year at Mount Union progressed, her academic struggles became more apparent. Despite the support of her family and friends, she found it increasingly difficult to keep up with her coursework. While she once excelled both socially and academically, Sydney's focus seemed to shift more towards the social aspects of college life rather than her studies. Her parents, Steve and Brenda, noticed the change in Sydney's behavior during her visits home. They tried to offer encouragement and support, but they couldn't shake the growing concern they felt for their daughter's academic performance. In court, people were really upset as they learned about what happened. Brenda's family and friends were heartbroken about losing her. Sydney's loved ones felt shocked and couldn't believe what had happened. They also felt loyal to Sydney, even though they were surprised by her actions. The whole sad situation made everyone think about how life can be fragile and how people's minds can be complicated. Sydney seemed to know what she was doing when the crime happened, which surprised everyone. Her family, friends, and the community wondered if she understood what was happening when she heard her mother. The crime made the whole neighborhood feel shaken up. As the police looked into what happened, they found out more surprising details. They were still trying to understand why Sydney did what she did. When Sydney started college at Mount Union University in 2018, she was really happy and excited. She lived in a dorm with her friend Lauren and joined a sorority, which helped her make more friends and enjoy college life. At first, Sydney did well in her classes, although she sometimes worried about them. When she came home for winter break, she had lots of stories to share about her college experiences. Her parents were hopeful that Sydney would keep doing well in college. They were proud of how confident she was becoming. But during her second year, things started to change. Sydney began having trouble with her classes and missing assignments. She seemed more interested in hanging out with friends than focusing on her studies. By the end of her sophomore year, her grades were so low that she was put on academic probation. This meant she had to improve her grades or face serious consequences. As Sydney's second year went on, her struggles with school became more obvious. Even though her family and friends tried to help her, she found it harder to keep up with her classes. Before, she used to do well both socially and academically, but now she was more focused on making friends than on studying. Her parents, Steve and Brenda, noticed these changes when Sydney visited home. They tried to encourage and support her, but they were worried about her grades and her well-being. Meanwhile, Sydney's relationship with her mother, Brenda, remained close. They continued to share a strong bond, despite Sydney's increasing challenges at school. Brenda tried to help Sydney navigate her academic difficulties, offering guidance and encouragement along the way. However, tensions began to rise as Sydney's grades continued to slip. The pressure of academic probation weighed heavily on her, adding to her already mounting stress and anxiety. As Sydney struggled to meet the expectations placed upon her, she found herself increasingly overwhelmed. The once bright future that lay ahead now seemed uncertain, overshadowed by the fear of failure and disappointment. Despite their efforts to support her, Sydney's parents couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness as they watched their daughter struggle. They desperately hoped she would find a way to overcome her challenges and rediscover the confidence and determination that had once defined her. But as the days passed, their worries only grew, leaving them to wonder what the future held for their beloved daughter. Instead of informing her parents about her probation status and the jeopardy of her scholarship, Sydney kept it a secret. In January 2020, she went back to Mount Union as if nothing had changed. Unfortunately, her grades didn't improve that semester, and she was eventually suspended from the university. Despite this, Sydney pretended to still be a student. She moved out of her dorm and stayed in nearby hotels, using money her dad thought was for her tuition. To her friends, Sydney seemed excited about the new semester and acted like a regular college student. She managed to keep her secret for a while, but eventually Mount Union administrators confronted her in February. They reminded her that as a suspended student, she wasn't allowed on campus. Sydney claimed her parents were struggling, so she needed more time to leave. The administration initially agreed, but later had to intervene when Sydney didn't comply. On February 24th, security had to step in and forbid Sydney from staying on campus any longer. Finally facing the reality of losing her scholarship and student status, Sydney had nowhere to hide. Her elaborate charade had been exposed, and she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. After years of high achievement, Sydney suddenly found herself at risk of failure, both in her own eyes and in the eyes of her family. The pressure mounted, setting the stage for an emotional eruption. During the investigation, it was revealed through transcripts that Sydney had not enrolled in classes for the spring semester, further confirming the extent of her deception. Meetings with university officials ensued, leading to Sydney being confronted about her continued presence on campus despite her suspended status. Following Sydney's confrontation with university officials, the realization of her predicament began to sink in. The weight of her deception and the looming consequences pressed heavily upon her. She had built her identity around academic success and the facade of being a model student, and now it was all unraveling before her eyes. As she grappled with the impending loss of her scholarship and student status, Sydney faced a profound internal struggle. The expectations of her family, the disappointment she felt in herself, and the fear of what the future held weighed heavily on her mind. She had worked so hard to maintain the illusion of perfection, only to find herself exposed and vulnerable. In the days that followed, Sydney retreated into a state of isolation, wrestling with feelings of shame, regret, and uncertainty. The once vibrant and confident young woman now found herself adrift in a sea of doubt and self-recrimination. Her parents, too, were left reeling from the revelation of Sydney's deceit. They grappled with feelings of betrayal and confusion, struggling to reconcile the image of their daughter as a diligent student with the reality of her actions. As the dust settled and the shock began to wear off, Sydney was left to confront the harsh reality of her situation. She had lost her footing on the path she had worked so hard to follow, and now she faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life from the ground up. But whether she could find the strength and resilience to rise from the ashes of her deception remained to be seen. As Sydney's troubles continued to escalate, her father, Steve, stumbled upon the truth in a shocking manner. On March 3, 2020, while attempting to access Sydney's university account, he discovered that she was no longer enrolled. Concerned, he checked her location through the family app and realized she was at their Akron home when she should have been on campus. Alarmed, Steve promptly left work and rushed home. When Steve arrived, he found Sydney at home and demanded an explanation. Sydney, cornered and with nowhere left to hide, finally confessed everything to her father. She admitted to failing classes and being told to leave campus weeks earlier. Steve, caught off guard by this revelation, suggested calling Brenda, Sydney's mother, to discuss the situation further. Meanwhile, Brenda, unaware of the unfolding drama, was making her way home to speak to Sydney. She called the university to clarify Sydney's standing, and University Dean John Fraser fielded the call, with Associate Dean Michelle Gaffney listening in. As they initiated the difficult conversation, they suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream and sounds of a struggle coming from Brenda's end of the line. Startled, Dean Frazier repeatedly called out Brenda's name, but there was no response. Instead, they heard thuds and screams, indicating a violent altercation. The situation was escalating rapidly, and both Dean Frazier and Michelle Gaffney were gripped with shock and concern as they listened helplessly from the other end of the line. As the chaos unfolded over the phone, Dean Frazier and Michelle Gaffney were gripped with panic and confusion. The suddenness and intensity of the situation left them stunned, unsure of what to do next. They could hear the sounds of struggle and desperation emanating from Brenda's end of the line, each thud and scream amplifying their sense of helplessness. Despite their shock, Dean Frazier tried desperately to get Brenda's attention, calling out her name in a futile attempt to intervene from afar. Meanwhile, Michelle Gaffney listened in horror as the situation escalated, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. In a matter of moments, what had begun as a routine phone call had transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. The once calm and composed conversation had descended into chaos, leaving Dean Frazier and Michelle Gaff reeling from the suddenness and brutality of it all. As the sounds of the struggle continued, Dean Frazier and Michelle Gaffney remained frozen in shock, their minds racing with fear and confusion. They could only listen helplessly as the situation unfolded, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they were powerless to stop it. As Michelle Gaff and Dean Fraser attempted to make sense of the chaos, they immediately contacted the authorities, and soon, police descended upon the Powell household. What they found inside was a scene of unimaginable horror. Sidney Powell stood in the living room, covered in blood and seemingly disconnected from reality. She alternated between hysterical crying and eerie moments of silence as officers tried to calm her erratic behavior. Meanwhile, other officers searched the house and made a grim discovery in the master bedroom. There, they found Brenda Powell's lifeless body, surrounded by signs of a brutal struggle. She had suffered over 20 stab wounds and blunt force trauma to her head. Nearby lay a cast iron skillet and a large kitchen knife, both stained with blood and hair. When Sidney was finally able to speak coherently, she claimed that an intruder had broken into the house and attacked her mother. According to her account, Brenda had told Sidney to run and hide while she fought off the assailant. Sidney claimed she emerged from hiding to find her mother fatally wounded. However, the evidence painted a different picture. Despite Sidney's claims, several inconsistencies in her story and physical evidence suggested that she was the actual perpetrator of the crime. The presence of the murder weapons, the lack of forced entry, and Sidney's own behavior all pointed to her involvement in her mother's death. As investigators pieced together the evidence, it became increasingly clear that Sidney's version of events was a fabrication designed to cover up her own actions. What had begun as a routine investigation had quickly turned into a complex and tragic case of deception and betrayal. The investigation into Brenda Powell's murder revealed compelling evidence contradicting Sidney's initial claims of an intruder's attack. Firstly, the supposedly broken window, alleged entry point for the intruder, had blood smears on the outside, suggesting it was broken from the inside, likely by Sidney after the attack. Moreover, Sidney bore visible wounds on her hands and arms consistent with those sustained during a violent assault, undermining her narrative of being an innocent bystander. Additionally, Sidney's assertion that Brenda had instructed her to flee seemed implausible given the extreme nature of Brenda's injuries. The over 20 stab wounds indicated a deeply personal and emotionally charged attack, incompatible with the notion of a random intruder. With mounting evidence pointing to Sidney's culpability, she was arrested in April 2020 and charged with her mother's murder. However, she was released on bail shortly thereafter, only to stand trial in September 2023. Throughout the trial, Sidney's defense team pursued a not guilty plea, citing temporary insanity induced by schizophrenia. They argued that Sidney's psychotic breakdown rendered her unable to comprehend the consequences of her actions. However, the prosecution countered, asserting that Sidney was fully aware of her choices before, during, and after the crime. They highlighted Sidney's attempts to stage the scene and conceal her involvement as evidence of her guilt. After a 12-day trial and extensive witness testimony, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, finding Sidney guilty on all charges related to her mother's murder. On September 20th, 2023, Sidney was sentenced to an indefinite term of 15 years to life in prison, ensuring she would remain incarcerated until at least age 38 before becoming eligible for parole. The judge upheld the jury's decision, citing the violent nature of the offenses and Sidney's refusal to accept responsibility. The outcome brought little solace to those devastated by Brenda's death, as they grappled with the incomprehensible violence perpetrated by Sidney, once a model teenager. Brenda's family, friends, and the local community mourned her loss, struggling to reconcile the tragic outcome with the happy memories of the Powell family they once knew. The sentencing marked the end of a tumultuous legal battle, but it also left lingering questions and wounds in its wake. For Brenda's loved ones, the pain of her loss remained raw, compounded by the shock of her daughter's actions. They struggled to reconcile the image of Sidney as a once promising young woman with the reality of her involvement in such a heinous crime. The ripple effects of Brenda's murder extended far beyond her immediate family. The small Ohio community where the Powell resided was shaken to its core by the tragedy.